The wife looked stunning in a red dress. Mistress was embarrassed. Husband regretted cheating. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to the Mr. Peter Stories family. I have a small, heartfelt request for all of you. Can you help me reach a milestone of 10,000 followers? We have just 3 days left, and I've taken on a fun challenge with my beautiful wife. She's right here, smiling at me as I speak. It's a humble request from my heart to yours. I hope it doesn't bother you in any way, but your support means the world to me. If you're with me on this journey, type yes in the comments to let me know. Also, how did you like the last story? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to share your feedback in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across Adrienne Delacroix's luxurious penthouse dressing room as she stood before the full-length mirror, her fingers trailing over the silk of her crimson dress. The fabric whispered beneath her touch, a testament to the countless hours she'd spent searching for the perfect shade of red, not just any red, but the exact color that had caught Dominic's eye when they first met at Le Jardin a decade ago. 10 years of marriage had sculpted their love into something she'd thought was unbreakable. Each morning, she'd wake to find little notes from Dominic tucked into unexpected places, between the pages of her planner, beneath her coffee cup, or folded into the pocket of her coat. His latest one still sat on her vanity. 10 years of magic and we're just getting started. Double quote. The paper had already begun to curl at the edges from how many times she'd unfolded and reread it throughout the week. The sprawling Manhattan skyline stretched beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to their shared success. They'd worked relentlessly to afford this view, she building her fashion empire from a single boutique, he climbing the ranks of his marketing firm until he became its youngest executive partner. Every achievement had been celebrated together, every setback weathered hand in hand. Adrienne's amber eyes, inherited from her grandmother along with an unshakable determination, caught the light as she adjusted the dress's sweetheart neckline. The designer had outdone himself, creating a masterpiece that seemed to float around her curves like crimson smoke. The bodice hugged her waist before flowing into a skirt that moved like water with each step. She'd kept it hidden in the back of her closet for weeks, behind the winter coats Dominic never touched. Her dark curls, usually pulled back in the no-nonsense style she wore to run her boutique fashion line, now cascaded over her shoulders in carefully crafted waves. The hairstylist had spent hours recreating the look from their wedding day, each curl pinned and sprayed until it fell exactly right. A delicate diamond necklace, Dominic's gift on their 5th anniversary, caught the fading sunlight and scattered tiny rainbows across the walls. Memories flooded her mind as she applied the finishing touches to her makeup. Their first date at Le Jardin, where a clumsy waiter had spilled wine on her white blouse, and Dominic, charming even then, had offered his jacket with a smile that made her forget about the ruined silk. Their wedding day, where she'd been so young, barely 25, with dreams bigger than their tiny first apartment could hold. The day they'd bought this penthouse, dancing barefoot on the empty floors, imagining the life they would build together. The anticipation of the evening ahead sent pleasant shivers down her spine. She'd orchestrated every detail meticulously, starting with the private corner booth at Le Jardin she'd reserved months in advance. The same booth where, 10 years ago, that fateful wine spill had changed her life forever. Their love story hadn't been perfect. No real love story was, but they'd built something beautiful together. Through the early years of struggling to establish her boutique while Dominic climbed the corporate ladder, they'd been each other's anchors. During the miscarriage in their 4th year of marriage, his unwavering support had given her the strength to try again, though they'd eventually decided to focus on their careers instead. They'd weathered family disapproval, financial uncertainties, and the constant pressure of balancing ambition with marriage. The setting sun cast long shadows across their bedroom as she gathered her essentials into a sleek clutch. Inside, she tucked the premiere tickets to the symphony's opening night next month. Dominic's favorite composer would be performing, and she'd pulled every string she had to get front-row seats. Her fingers brushed against the vintage pocket watch she'd spent months tracking down, an exact match to the one in the old photograph of Dominic's grandfather that sat on his desk. Each detail of the evening had been planned with precision. The champagne would be waiting at their table, chilled to perfection. The chef had agreed to recreate the exact menu from their first date. Even the playlist, softly filling the restaurant, would include their song at precisely the moment they were meant to arrive. Adrienne slipped her feet into red-soled heels, another anniversary splurge. The shoes clicked satisfyingly against the marble floors as she made her final preparations. She spritzed her signature perfume, jasmine and vanilla, the scent she'd worn on their wedding day, in the air, and walked through it, letting the fragrance settle on her skin. The phone buzzed with a message from the car service. Their driver was waiting downstairs. New York's autumn air greeted her as she stepped into the elevator, carrying with it the scent of turning leaves and wood smoke. Maxwell, the doorman, who'd watched their love story unfold over the years, grinned and gave her a knowing wink. "You look stunning, Mrs. Delacroix. Mr. Dominic won't know what hit him." "That's the plan, Maxwell," she laughed, the sound full of joy and anticipation. Another memory surfaced, Dominic carrying her through these same doors after their honeymoon, both of them laughing as Maxwell applauded. How young they'd been then, how full of dreams and promises. The sleek black car waited at the curb, its driver holding the door with practiced elegance. As Adrienne settled into the leather seat, she pulled out her phone to send Dominic a message. "On my way, my love. 10 years of memories, and tonight we'll make more." Her finger hovered over the send button for a moment before pressing it, a smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. Traffic moved surprisingly well for a Friday evening, as though the universe itself was conspiring to make the night perfect. The lights of the city began to twinkle on one by one, creating a romantic backdrop for what she imagined would be an unforgettable anniversary celebration. She watched the familiar streets pass by, each corner holding some memory of their life together. The cafe where they had Sunday brunch, the park where they walked hand in hand during summer evenings, the bookstore where they'd spent countless rainy afternoons. Through the car window, she caught glimpses of other couples walking hand in hand, their faces glowing in the gentle evening light. She remembered countless nights like this, walking these same streets with Dominic, planning their future together. They'd talk for hours about their dreams, expanding her boutique into a fashion empire, his ambitions to revolutionize the marketing industry, the family they'd planned to start someday. The car turned onto the street where Le Jardin waited, its elegant facade unchanged by the decade that had passed since their first meeting. Warm light spilled from its windows, and the sound of soft jazz floated through the air. The maître d' would be waiting with champagne already chilled to perfection, the corner booth set with the finest linens and crystal. As the car glided to a stop, Adrienne caught her reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at her radiated confidence, love, and joy. Her crimson dress seemed to glow in the gentle light of the street lamps, and her amber eyes sparkled with anticipation. She looked every bit the successful, deeply in love woman she was, ready to celebrate a decade of partnership with the man who still made her heart skip a beat. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first wine-stained meeting to building their dreams together. They'd faced every challenge as a team, growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. Tonight was more than just an anniversary celebration. It was a testament to the power of their love, their dedication to each other, and the life they'd built together. The doorman reached for the car door, and Adrienne took a deep breath, savoring these last moments. The night air carried the faint sounds of classical music from within the restaurant, Their song, she realized with a smile. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Or so she thought. Little did she know, fate had very different plans for the evening ahead. The perfect world she'd built with such care was about to shatter like the champagne flute that would soon slip from her fingers. But in this moment, suspended between past and future, Adrienne Delacroix was simply a woman in love, stepping out of a car in a red dress, ready to surprise her husband on their anniversary. The maitre d' opened the heavy wooden doors, releasing the warm glow of candlelight and the soft murmur of conversation. Adrienne stepped forward, her heart full of love and anticipation, completely unaware that in mere moments her world would turn upside down. The red dress she wore with such pride would become a symbol not just of love, but of strength, resilience, and ultimately, transformation. As she followed the maitre d' through the restaurant, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, Adrienne held her head high, every inch the confident, successful woman she'd become. The corner booth awaited, but destiny had prepared a very different scene than the one she'd spent months planning. The night was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test every ounce of strength she possessed. But for now, in these final precious moments of blissful ignorance, Adrienne Delacroix was still just a woman in love, walking toward what she believed would be another perfect chapter in her fairy tale romance. If only she knew what waited around the corner, perhaps she would have savored these last moments of happiness even more. But isn't that always the way? We never truly appreciate the calm before the storm until we're caught in the tempest. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. The warm glow of Le Jardin's antique chandeliers cast intimate shadows across the restaurant's rich mahogany walls as Adrienne followed François, the maître d' who had served them on their first date a decade ago. Each step on the polished marble floor brought her closer to what she believed would be the perfect anniversary celebration, her crimson dress flowing behind her like liquid fire. The familiar scent of fresh roses and fine cuisine filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of Clair de Lune drifting from the piano bar. François, now with distinguished silver threading through his dark hair, moved with the same practiced grace she remembered from years of special occasions celebrated in these walls. His immaculate black suit and perfectly pressed white shirt seemed to absorb and reflect the golden light as he guided her through the maze of tables. "Madame Delacroix," he said in his gentle French accent, "it brings me such joy to see you here again." His words carried a weight he couldn't have intended, an unwitting herald of the drama about to unfold. The restaurant buzzed with the gentle murmur of Manhattan's elite. Soft laughter, the subtle clink of cristal against fine bone china, the whispered conversations of lovers and deal-makers alike. Couples lost in their own romantic evenings barely glanced up as Adrienne passed, though a few heads turned to admire her stunning dress. She'd chosen this particular shade of red because of how it caught the light, how it made her feel invincible. That invincibility was about to be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. As they approached the corner booth, their booth where Dominic had first spilled wine on her blouse 10 years ago, François slowed his pace, an almost imperceptible hesitation in his step. Later, Adrienne would remember this moment and wonder if he had somehow sensed what was waiting around the corner. The thick velvet curtains that partially screened the private booth swayed slightly, disturbed by movement within. The first thing she noticed was the champagne bottle, Dom Perignon Rosé 2012, Dominic's favorite, already open on the table. 2 glasses, half empty, bearing the telltale smudge of Sienna's signature MAC Ruby Woo lipstick on both rims. Her mind registered this detail with a curious detachment, even as her heart began to race. The reservation had been for 8 o'clock sharp. She was 5 minutes early. Then time seemed to slow. the world narrowing to the scene before her as Francois drew back the curtain fully. There, in the intimate shadows of their special booth, Dominic sat with his head bent close to the woman Adrienne knew all too well. Sienna Blackwood, his marketing executive, wore an emerald silk dress from Adrienne's latest collection, her hand resting intimately on Dominic's arm as they shared what was clearly more than a business dinner. The remains of their appetizers, the same truffle-infused risotto Adrienne and Dominic had shared on their first date, scattered across the table like evidence at a crime scene. The crystal champagne flute in Adrienne's hand, when had Francois handed it to her, slipped from her suddenly numb fingers. The sound of it shattering against the marble floor was like a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The pianist's fingers froze above the keys. All eyes turned toward the corner booth, drawn by the sound of breaking crystal and breaking hearts. Dominic's head snapped up, his green eyes widening in horror as they met Adrienne's amber ones. Sienna's perfect features drained of color, her red lips forming a perfect O of surprise. In that frozen moment, Adrienne noticed every excruciating detail. The way Sienna's perfectly manicured hand still lingered on Dominic's arm, the intimate scatter of shared plates, the lipstick stain on his collar that matched Sienna's shade exactly. "Adrienne," Dominic breathed, already pushing back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't... Let me explain." His voice cracked, betraying the panic beneath his usually composed exterior. The restaurant had fallen completely silent, the drama unfolding before them better than any evening's entertainment. Francois had melted away with professional discretion, though Adrienne caught glimpse of him quietly directing the staff to ensure no one disturbed the unfolding scene. Somewhere in the distance, a glass clinked against a plate, the sound sharp in the weighted silence. Sienna was the first to move, gathering her purse with trembling hands, her confidence evaporating under the weight of exposure. "Mrs. Delacroix," she started, her voice small and uncertain, so different from the assured tones she used in board meetings. "I can explain—" "Can you?" Adrienne's voice emerged surprisingly steady, cutting through the air like a blade. "Can you explain why you're having an intimate dinner with my husband on our 10th wedding anniversary, in our special booth?" Each word was precisely enunciated, each syllable dripping with ice. "Can you explain why you're wearing a dress from my collection while betraying me?" Dominic stood now, his expensive Armani suit wrinkled from how he'd been sitting so close to Sienna. "Darling, please," he began, reaching for her hand. "This is just a business dinner that ran late. You're early. I was going to meet you at home." Even as he spoke, his eyes darted to Sienna, a silent message passing between them that only confirmed their intimacy. "A business dinner?" Adrienne's laugh was hollow, echoing off the restaurant's walls. "Is that why you're wearing the cologne I gave you for our anniversary last year? Is that why Sienna's wearing my design and your hand was on her thigh under the table? Is that why there are 2 empty bottles of your favorite champagne when you told me you had meetings until 8? The murmurs from nearby tables grew louder. Someone whispered, "Isn't that Adrienne Delacroix?" "The designer," another voice. "And isn't that Dominic Delacroix from Sterling Marketing?" Their private drama was becoming public spectacle, but Adrienne couldn't bring herself to care. Let them see. Let them all see the truth behind the perfect facade. Sienna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I should go," she mumbled, gathering her things with shaking hands. The confident marketing executive who commanded boardrooms had vanished, replaced by a woman who knew she'd been caught in an unforgivable act. Her perfect composure had crumbled, revealing the reality beneath the polished exterior. A woman who had knowingly stepped into another's marriage. "Stay." Adrienne's command froze both of them in place. "After all, you've won yourself quite a prize, haven't you, Sienna?" a lying, cheating executive who clearly has no respect for vows or commitments. Her voice remained eerily calm, even as her world collapsed around her. "Tell me, how long has this been going on? Was it before or after I invited you to our Christmas party? Before or after you sat in my design studio, choosing pieces from my collection while sleeping with my husband?" The weight of the symphony tickets in her clutch seemed to burn against her side. The vintage watch she'd spent months tracking down felt like lead. All those careful plans, all those loving preparations, reduced to ashes in an instant. She thought of the hours spent choosing this dress, the careful preparation for a night that was supposed to celebrate their love. Now it would mark its end instead. "Adrienne, please." Dominic stepped toward her, his face a mask of desperation. 10 years of marriage. You can't throw that away over one mistake. Even now, he was trying to minimize it, to reduce this betrayal to a simple error in judgment. "Think about everything we've built together. Think about our future." One mistake? Adrienne's eyebrow arched perfectly, her years of social training coming to her aid. "Tell me, Dominic, how long has this mistake been going on? How many late nights at the office were spent right here, in our special booth? How many times have you laughed about the stupid, trusting wife while you worked on your marketing strategies?" Sienna flinched at each word, her designer dress, Adrienne's design, suddenly looking cheap and tawdry in the romantic lighting. "It wasn't like that," she whispered, but her words carried in the silent restaurant. "We never meant to get caught?" Adrienne finished for her. "No, I suppose you didn't. How inconvenient for you both that I decided to surprise my husband on our anniversary." She turned her gaze fully on Sienna now. "Tell me, did he use the same lines on you that he used on me, about how beautiful you are in candlelight, about how he's never felt this way before? Or did he just skip straight to seducing? You in the conference room after hours?" The color drained from both their faces, a direct hit, so it had been the conference room. Adrienne felt decades of memories being rewritten in real time, every romantic moment now tainted with doubt. How many business trips had been covers for their affair? How many late meetings had been spent in each other's arms? A flash caught her eye. Someone in the restaurant was recording on their phone. By morning, this would be all over social media. The perfect power couple of Manhattan's business world imploding spectacularly in public. She could already see the headlines. "Fashion designer catches husband with model in her own design." "I love you," Dominic said desperately, reaching for her again. "This was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Sienna means nothing to me. Please, let's go home and talk about this." His voice cracked on the word home, and for a moment Adrienne saw real fear in his eyes, fear of losing everything they'd built together. But Adrienne was already backing away, her head held high, her crimson dress a banner of dignity in the face of humiliation. "No, Dominic, you don't love me. You love the idea of me, the convenient wife who supports your career and believes your lies. The wife who makes you look good at corporate events and designs clothes for your mistress to wear while you betray everything we built together." Chapter 3. The Aftermath. The penthouse was silent as Adrienne stepped out of the elevator, her heels no longer clicking with confidence but dragging heavily against the marble floor. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled in her heart. Her crimson dress, once a symbol of celebration, now felt like armor she couldn't wait to shed. Maxwell, the doorman who had witnessed her triumphant departure just hours ago, avoided her eyes as she passed. News traveled fast in Manhattan. No doubt the scene at Le Jardin was already circulating through social media and society gossip channels. Tomorrow her humiliation would be complete, splashed across page 6 and whispered about in every high-rise from Park Avenue to the Upper West Side. Inside her sanctuary, Adrienne moved through the familiar spaces like a ghost, Everything looked exactly as she'd left it, her fashion magazines perfectly stacked on the coffee table, fresh flowers in their crystal vases, photos of her and Dominic scattered throughout like landmines of memory. A half-empty coffee cup still sat on the kitchen counter, bearing the faint imprint of her morning lipstick. Had that only been this morning? It felt like a lifetime ago. Her phone buzzed incessantly, Dominic's name flashing across the screen again and again, interspersed with messages from friends who had already heard. She silenced it without looking at any of them. What could he possibly say? What excuse could justify betraying their marriage in their special place with a woman who wore clothes Adrienne herself had designed? In their bedroom, no, her bedroom now, she caught her reflection in the full-length mirror where she'd admired her dress just hours before. The woman who looked back at her was both familiar and strange. Her makeup remained perfect, her hair still elegantly styled, but her eyes held a new hardness. The betrayed wife had left Le Jardin, but who was this woman who returned? With mechanical precision, Adrienne began to undress. She unzipped the red dress carefully, hanging it on a padded hanger with the reverence it deserved. This dress would never be worn again, but it would serve a different purpose. It would hang in her office as a reminder, not of betrayal, but of the moment she chose her dignity over a beautiful lie. The diamond necklace Dominic had given her on their 5th anniversary followed, placed precisely in its velvet box. Each piece of jewelry he'd ever given her was methodically removed and stored away. These weren't just accessories anymore. They were artifacts of a life that had ended tonight. Standing in her silk robe, Adrienne moved through their closet with purpose. Dominic's suits hung in perfect rows, each one carefully chosen and maintained. His collection of ties, his precious cufflinks, the vintage watch she'd given him last Christmas, all of it would have to go. But not tonight. Tonight was for something else entirely. She made her way to her home office, a space she'd carved out for herself when her fashion line began to take off. The wall of awards and magazine covers seemed to mock her now. How many of these events had Dominic attended with Sienna waiting in the wings? How many of her triumphs had been secretly shared with another woman? Her laptop hummed to life, its soft blue glow illuminating the darkness. Without hesitation, she began to type. To the board of directors at Sterling Marketing, I trust this email finds you well. I'm writing to inform you of some concerning developments regarding the conduct of your executive partner, Dominic Delacroix. The words flowed easily, professionally, without a hint of the emotion churning beneath her calm exterior. She detailed the inappropriate relationship between Dominic and his subordinate, the potential legal liability for the company, the risk to client relationships, especially given that many of their clients were also clients of her fashion house. Next came emails to her lawyer, her financial advisor, and her PR team. Each message was precise, controlled, laying the groundwork for what would come next. She wasn't just a betrayed wife. She was a businesswoman protecting her empire, and she would do it with the same precision and attention to detail that had made her successful in the first place. The sun was rising by the time she finished, casting long shadows across the penthouse. Her phone had finally fallen silent, though she knew it wouldn't last. Soon the media would begin calling, hungry for details of Manhattan's latest society scandal. But they would find no tears, no messy accusations, no crying wife seeking sympathy. Instead, they would find Adrienne Delacroix, fashion mogul and businesswoman, executing a plan with surgical precision. The woman who had walked into Le Jardin in a red dress had died there, shattered like the champagne flute on the marble floor. The woman who emerged would be something else entirely. A text message finally broke through her concentration, not from Dominic, but from an unexpected source. Sienna, I never meant for this to happen. He told me you were separated. Please, let me explain. Adrienne's laugh was hollow in the empty penthouse. Of course he had. How many other lies had he told? How many other women had there been before Sienna? The questions tumbled through her mind, but she pushed them aside. They didn't matter now. What mattered was what came next. She opened her laptop again, this time pulling up the files for her upcoming fashion collection. The spring line had been themed around renewal and rebirth. How fitting. With quick, decisive keystrokes, she began making changes. The soft, romantic pieces inspired by her marriage would be replaced. This collection would be about power, about transformation, about rising from the ashes. A notification popped up on her screen. The first online gossip site had picked up the story. Fashion empire's power couple. Implodes. Adrienne Delacroix catches husband with model in her own design. The headline was almost amusing in its accuracy. Let them talk. Let them speculate. She had work to do. The intercom buzzed. Maxwell's apologetic voice informed her that reporters were gathering in the lobby. Of course they were. Manhattan's vultures never slept, always circling for the next scandal. But they wouldn't find a victim here. No, they would find something far more interesting. Adrienne walked to her closet, pushing aside the designer dresses and cocktail attire. At the back, in a garment bag she'd never opened, hung her newest design. A black power suit with blood-red accents, created for a collection she'd never intended to release. She'd designed it during a dark moment months ago, when first suspicion had crept in. Now it seemed prophetic. The suit fit perfectly, as she knew it would. Every piece she designed was a part of her, an extension of her vision. But this one was different. This wasn't just fashion, this was armor. She pulled her hair back severely, applied her signature red lipstick, and slipped into her highest Louboutins. The woman in the mirror now looked like someone else entirely, someone stronger, colder, more dangerous. Her phone buzzed again. Dominic had finally given up calling and resorted to text. "Please, Adrienne, come home, we can fix this. Everything I built is nothing without you." She smiled at that. Her first genuine smile since walking into Le Jardin. He still didn't understand. He thought this was about their marriage, about his betrayal. He hadn't realized yet that this was about something much bigger. This was about power, about control, about showing the world who Adrienne Delacroix really was when she stepped out of her husband's shadow. The sun had fully risen now, painting Manhattan in shades of gold and promise. Adrienne stood at her window, looking out over the city she'd helped build. Today would be day one of her new life. No more perfect wife, no more supportive partner content to let her husband shine. Today she would begin dismantling everything Dominic had built, piece by piece, until he understood exactly what he'd lost. But first, she had a fashion empire to run. She gathered her things, laptop, phone, the files she'd prepared through the night. The reporters would be waiting, hungry for their soundbite, eager to capture the tears of a betrayed wife. Instead, they would get their first glimpse of the new Adrienne Delacroix, the woman who emerged from betrayal not broken, but transformed. As she stepped into the elevator, her heels clicking with renewed purpose against the marble floor, Adrienne allowed herself one final moment of reflection. The woman who had walked into Le Jardin in a red dress was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who would make Manhattan remember this night not as a scandal, but as the beginning of something far more interesting. The elevator doors closed on the penthouse and on her old life. It was time to show New York and Dominic exactly what happened when you underestimated Adrienne Delacroix. The aftermath of betrayal wouldn't be tears and broken plates. It would be the systematic dismantling of everything Dominic held dear, starting with his career, his reputation, and his precious marketing firm. The game had changed, and Adrienne was ready to play by new rules, rules she would write herself in ink as red as her dress, as red as her lipstick, as red as the blood he'd drawn from her heart. Manhattan would never be the same, and neither would she. Chapter 4. Phoenix Rising. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrienne's office at Delacroix Fashion House, casting long shadows across her sleek desk. She sat in her high-backed leather chair, surrounded by the empire she'd built, reading the morning's headlines on her tablet. The top story on every fashion and society blog detailed last night's events at Le Jardin with varying degrees of accuracy. Manhattan's power couple shatters. Fashion icon catches husband in scandalous affair. Breaking, Dominique Delacroix caught with junior executive in wife's design. Exclusive, inside the fashion world's most explosive scandal. Adrienne swiped through them with cool detachment, noting which publications had been kind and which would need to be reminded of their advertising contracts with her company. Her PR team had been working through the night, crafting a narrative that positioned her not as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Delacroix, the board members have arrived for the emergency meeting," her assistant's voice announced, right on schedule. She stood, smoothing down her black power suit, a new design from her upcoming collection, accented with subtle crimson details that matched her perfectly applied lipstick. The woman in the mirror behind her desk looked nothing like the betrayed wife from last night. This woman was all business, all power. "Send them in," she commanded, moving to take her position at the head of the conference table. The glass walls of her office offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the city she was about to remind of her influence. The board members filed in, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. These men and women had backed her when she was just starting out, had helped her build Delacroix Fashion House into an empire. Now they would help her reshape it into something even more powerful. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Adrienne began, her voice steady and controlled. "As you've no doubt heard, certain personal developments have necessitated some immediate changes to our company's direction." She clicked a remote, and the screens around the room came to life with images from her new collection. Gone were the romantic, flowing pieces inspired by her marriage. In their place were designs that spoke of power, strength, and transformation. "Gentlemen, ladies, what you're looking at is Phoenix, our new direction. We're scrapping the spring line and fast-tracking this collection instead. It's bold, it's aggressive, and it's exactly what every woman who's ever been underestimated needs in her wardrobe." The room buzzed with whispers as the board members examined the designs. Adrienne had spent the entire night working on these sketches, channeling her pain into creation. The collection was unlike anything they'd seen from her before. Structured suits with unexpected details, dresses that somehow managed to be both protective and alluring, all in a palette of blacks, greys, and deep, bloody reds. "This is different," Marcus Chen, the head of marketing, ventured carefully. "The production timeline would be incredibly tight." "Then we'll work faster," Adrienne replied, her tone brooking no argument. "I want this collection in stores within 2 months. Every woman who's ever been betrayed, every professional who's been overlooked, every person who's had to rebuild from ashes, they're our market now." She pulled up another screen, this one showing the traffic analytics from their website since last night. "Our social media engagement has tripled in the last 12 hours. We're trending on every platform. The world is watching to see what I'll do next, what we'll do next." Moving through the slides with precision, she outlined her vision, not just for a new collection, but for a complete rebranding of Delacroix Fashion House. The romantic, aspirational brand would evolve into something more powerful, more relevant to modern women. "We're not just selling clothes anymore," she declared, her voice filling the room. "We're selling transformation. Every piece in this collection tells a story of rising above, of turning pain into power. And trust me," she smiled, a sharp edge to her expression, "there's a market for that." The board members were silent, taking in her words, her conviction, the steel in her spine. They'd always known Adrienne was a force to be reckoned with, but this was different. This was a woman transformed by fire. The budget implications, the CFO began, will be offset by the publicity we're about to receive. Adrienne cut in smoothly. I've already lined up exclusive coverage with Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. They want the story behind the collection, the woman behind the headlines. We're going to give them something unforgettable. She clicked to the final slide, a mock-up of an advertisement. It showed a model in a stunning black suit with red accents, standing in the ruins of what appeared to be a luxury restaurant. The tagline read, "Rise." "This is more than a fashion collection," Adrienne continued, her voice passionate but controlled. "This is a statement. This is about every woman who's ever had to rebuild herself from the ground up. And trust me, that market is vastly underserved." The room was silent for a moment before Victoria Chang, one of the senior board members, spoke up. "The timing is aggressive, but the concept, it's brilliant. Raw, relevant, real. It's exactly what the brand needs." One by one, the other board members nodded their agreement. They could see it now, the potential, the story, the power of turning personal tragedy into professional triumph. "Then we're decided," Adrienne stated, standing to her full height. "I want production samples on my desk by the end of the week. Marketing, I need a complete campaign strategy by tomorrow. PR, prepare for a media blitz unlike anything we've done before." As the board members filed out, energized by the new direction, Adrienne remained at the head of the table, looking out over her city. Her phone buzzed, another message from Dominic. She deleted it without reading it. Let him wonder. Let him worry. While he was trying to salvage his reputation at Sterling Marketing, she would be building something unprecedented. The woman he'd betrayed wasn't just surviving, she was transforming, and she was taking her entire empire with her. Her assistant appeared at the door. "Ms. Delacroix, Sterling Marketing's Board of Directors is requesting an urgent meeting regarding their ongoing contracts with us." Adrienne smiled, a sharp, satisfied expression. "Tell them I'm booked solid for the next 2 weeks. They can speak with our legal team about any concerns regarding contract termination fees." The first domino was falling. By the time she was done, Dominic would learn exactly what it meant to underestimate her. But first, she had an empire to rebuild, stronger and more powerful than ever. She turned back to her desk, pulling up the designs for her Phoenix collection. There was work to be done, and Adrienne Delacroix, rising from the ashes of her marriage, was just getting started. Chapter 5. Sienna's Fall. The pristine halls of Sterling Marketing felt suffocating as Sienna Blackwood made her way to her corner office. The whispers followed her like shadows, growing silent as she passed, only to resume with increased intensity in her wake. Her Louboutin heels, usually a source of confidence, felt unstable beneath her, each step an exercise in maintaining composure. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night, messages from friends, family, colleagues, all wanting to know if the headlines were true. Rising marketing executive in affair scandal blazed across every business news site, her professional reputation crumbling with each new article. The emerald dress from Adrienne's collection, the damning evidence from last night, hung in her office closet, a testament to her monumental mistake. She couldn't bear to look at it, couldn't stand the reminder of how she'd betrayed not just Adrienne's marriage, but the unspoken code of professional women supporting each other. As she rounded the corner to her office, her assistant Miranda quickly averted her eyes, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. The girl who usually greeted her with a bright smile and perfectly prepared coffee now couldn't even look at her. The coffee cup on her desk was noticeably absent. Sienna's office, with its view of Manhattan's skyline, had always been her sanctuary. Now it felt like a fishbowl, with curious eyes peering in from every angle. The photographs from company events that lined her walls seemed to mock her, In each one, she stood proud and professional, the rising star of sterling marketing. How quickly things could change in just one night. Her computer chimed with new emails. Meeting with HR, urgent. Client request for account manager change, immediate response required, board meeting regarding recent events, mandatory attendance. The last one made her stomach churn. She'd worked so hard to get here, climbing the corporate ladder with relentless determination. Now it was all slipping away because she'd believed Dominic's lies, because she'd wanted to believe them. He and Adrienne are separated, he'd told her over late-night strategy sessions that gradually became something more. We're just staying together for appearances, for the business. Each lie had been delivered with such conviction, such seeming sincerity. A knock on her door startled her from her thoughts. Janet Chen, the head of HR, stood in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes cold. "Ms. Blackwood, we need to discuss some concerning developments." The meeting that followed was brutally efficient. Words like company image and moral clause and professional conduct flew around the room like arrows, each one finding its mark. Her relationship with a superior, the public scandal, the potential legal implications, it all added up to one inevitable conclusion. "We'll need your resignation by the end of the day," Janet concluded, sliding a prepared document across the desk. "The company is prepared to offer a generous severance package in exchange for your discretion and a non-disclosure agreement." Sienna's hands trembled as she reached for the paper. "And Dominic?" she asked, hating how weak her voice sounded. Janet's expression tightened. "Mr. Delacroix's situation is being handled separately by the board." Of course it was. He was a partner, established, valuable. She was expendable. Throughout the day, clients called one after another, all with the same message. They wanted different account managers. Projects she'd spent months developing were being reassigned. Presentations she'd prepared would be given by others. Her carefully built career was unraveling thread by thread. Her phone buzzed again. Dominic. She hadn't heard from him since last night, since Adrienne's devastating exit from Le Jardin. His message was brief. "I'm sorry. The board needs someone to take responsibility. I can't protect you." The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over, smearing her perfect makeup. He couldn't protect her. He was the one who needed protection, who had pursued her, who had woven such beautiful lies about his failing marriage and his plans for their future together. By afternoon, the gossip had evolved. Someone had leaked that she'd been wearing one of Adrienne's designs during the confrontation. The irony was too delicious for the media to ignore. "Homewrecker wore victims designed to a fair rendezvous," screamed the latest headline. As she packed her office, placing years of achievements into a single box, Sienna caught her reflection in the window. The confident, ambitious woman who had walked into this office just yesterday was gone, replaced by someone she barely recognized. Her designer outfit, usually so empowering, felt like a costume now. The final blow came as she was leaving. An email from the American Marketing Association. They were revoking her 30 Under 30 award in light of recent events. Her professional reputation, so carefully built over years of hard work, had been destroyed in a single night. The elevator ride down was a lonely one. No goodbye parties, no well wishes from colleagues, just silent stares and whispered conversations that stopped when she came near. The security guard watched her sign out for the last time, probably under instructions to ensure she didn't return. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted Manhattan in golden hues, but Sienna felt nothing but cold. Her phone buzzed one last time, a message from Adrienne Delacroix. "The dress you wore last night. Keep it. Consider it a reminder of the price of betrayal." As she hailed a taxi, another headline notification popped up. "Delacroix Fashion House announces groundbreaking new collection." The photo showed Adrian, resplendent in a black power suit with red accents, looking more powerful and successful than ever. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Rough day?" Sienna closed her eyes, leaning back against the leather seat. "You have no idea." Her career was in shambles, her reputation destroyed, and the man she'd risked everything for had thrown her under the bus to save himself. The fall from grace was complete. The taxi merged into traffic, carrying her away from the life she'd built and destroyed in equal measure. In her bag, the resignation letter felt like a lead weight, but not as heavy as the knowledge that she had no one to blame but herself. Manhattan's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, the buildings growing smaller but no less imposing. Somewhere up there, Adrienne Delacroix was rising from the ashes of betrayal, while Sienna Blackwood's carefully constructed world had burned to the ground. The price of betrayal, indeed. Chapter 6. The Empire Strikes Back. The boardroom at Sterling Marketing hummed with tension as Dominique Delacroix adjusted his tie for the third time. The emergency board meeting was scheduled to start in 5 minutes, and the knot of dread in his stomach grew with each passing second. Headlines about the Le Jardin scandal still dominated every news cycle, and the company's stock had dropped 12 points since opening bell. His phone vibrated, another message from a client requesting to terminate their contract. That made 7 this morning alone. Most were long-term clients, ones who'd worked with both Sterling Marketing and Delacroix Fashion House. Now they were jumping ship, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The board members filed in, their faces grim. Thomas Sterling, the company founder and CEO, entered last, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a stone-cold expression. Before anyone could speak, his assistant rushed in with a tablet, her face pale. "Sir, you need to see this immediately." The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying a breaking news alert. Breaking. Delacroix Fashion House acquires majority stake in Sterling Marketing through silent partner subsidiaries. The room erupted in chaos. Dominic felt the blood drain from his face as security badges were suddenly deactivated with a synchronized chime. The elevator's distinctive ping echoed through the hallway, and the sharp, precise click of heels approached. Adrienne Delacroix stood in the doorway, wearing a blood-red suit that seemed to draw all the light in the room to her. Behind her, a team of lawyers and executives moved with military precision, carrying folders and tablets. "Ladies and gentlemen," she smiled, every inch the predator who had cornered her prey, "I believe this meeting has a new agenda." She strode to the head of the table, her team efficiently distributing documents to each board member. Her presence commanded the room, making even Thomas Sterling seem diminished in comparison. "Over the past 6 months," Adrienne began, her voice carrying easily through the stunned silence, "Delacroix Fashion House, through various subsidiaries, has been quietly acquiring shares in Sterling Marketing. As of this morning, we own 51% of the company." Dominic's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. 6 months. She'd been planning this for 6 months, even before she discovered his affair with Sienna. "This is impossible," Thomas Sterling sputtered. "Our shareholding structure was vulnerable through your Asian subsidiaries," Adrienne cut in smoothly. "Perhaps if your executive partner hadn't been so distracted with personal matters, he might have noticed our movements in the market." Every head turned to Dominic, who felt the weight of their accusing stares. He'd been so consumed with hiding his affair, he'd missed the signs of a corporate takeover happening right under his nose. "The documents before you outline the new structure of Sterling Marketing," Adrienne continued, professional and poised. "We'll be merging the company into the Delacroix Group as a wholly owned subsidiary. All current contracts will be reviewed for renewal." She paused, her amber eyes finding Dominic's. "Of course, There will be some immediate changes to senior management. Effective immediately, Dominique Delacroix is relieved of his position as executive partner. The room spun around him. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, crumbling in minutes. And there stood Adrienne, orchestrating his professional execution with the same precision she used in designing her collections. "You can't do this," he managed, his voice weak even to his own ears. "Actually, I can. And I have." Adrienne's smile was razor-sharp. "The board will find a complete audit of your activities over the past year in Section 3 of their packets. Interesting reading, especially the parts about client entertainment expenses at Le Jardin." One by one, the board members flipped to the indicated section. Dominic watched as their expressions shifted from shock to disgust. Every dinner with Sienna, every bottle of champagne, all meticulously documented. "Now," Adrienne continued, "shall we discuss the future of sterling marketing? I have some thoughts about rebranding." For the next hour, she outlined her vision for the company, a complete restructuring that would integrate it seamlessly into her growing empire. Her presentation was flawless, her strategy impeccable. The board members, initially hostile, began nodding along as she revealed projected growth figures and synergy opportunities. Dominic sat frozen, watching as she systematically dismantled and rebuilt his company in her own image. This wasn't just revenge, this was a masterclass in corporate warfare. She hadn't just taken his company. She'd shown everyone in the room that she was the better business leader. "Mr. Delacroix," she said finally, turning to him with mock concern, "you seem unwell. Perhaps you should take the rest of the day off. Security will escort you to clear out your office." As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Dominic stood on shaky legs, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume he had no right to wear. "Adrienne," he tried one last time, "please." "That's Miss Delacroix," she corrected coolly, "or Madam CEO if you prefer, though I doubt we'll have much cause for future interaction." He walked out of the boardroom on legs that felt like lead, past wide-eyed employees who quickly looked away. His phone was already filling with messages. News of the takeover had broken on every major business channel. In his office, as he numbly packed his personal items under the watchful eye of security, he noticed something new on his desk, a single red dress carefully laid out, the same design Sienna had worn that night at Le Jardin. Attached was a note in Adrienne's elegant handwriting. "Consider this a reminder. Everything you built was possible because of what we built together, and now everything you built belongs to me." The security guards escorted him through the lobby, past journalists already gathering outside. As the doors closed behind him, he caught one last glimpse of the sterling marketing logo above the reception desk. Tomorrow, he knew, it would bear the Delacroix name instead. His phone buzzed one final time, a message from Adrienne. "The dress code at Sterling Delacroix will be changing. I recommend updating your wardrobe. I hear there's an excellent new collection coming out soon." Dominic stepped into the waiting car, his empire now part of hers, his betrayal complete. In the end, he'd underestimated not just his wife, but the businesswoman he'd helped create, and she had made him pay for that mistake in the most exquisite way possible, by taking everything he valued and making it her own. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the building where he'd spent 15 years building his dream. But Adrienne's revenge wasn't complete. This was just the beginning. She hadn't just taken his company, she'd shown the world exactly who Adrienne Delacroix was when she stepped out of his shadow, and Manhattan would never be the same. Chapter 7. Recognition. 3 months after the takeover, Dominic stood in his new, significantly smaller office at a mid-tier advertising agency, staring at the latest issue of Forbes. Adrienne's face graced the cover, stunning in a black suit with crimson accents from her Phoenix collection. The headline read, "Rising from the Ashes: How Adrien Delacroix Turned Personal Betrayal into a Business Empire." His coffee grew cold as he read the article, each word a dagger to his pride. The piece detailed how she'd transformed both Delacroix Fashion House and the newly renamed Sterling Delacroix Marketing into a powerhouse conglomerate. The Phoenix collection had sold out within days of its release, with wait lists growing longer by the hour. Every piece told a story of transformation, of power reclaimed. His phone buzzed, another rejection from a potential client. His reputation was in tatters, his client list a shadow of its former glory. The few accounts he'd managed to keep were small businesses who couldn't afford better. How far he'd fallen from the executive suite at Sterling Marketing. The article went on to describe Adrienne's meteoric rise after the Le Jardin incident. She'd taken his betrayal and turned it into fuel, channeling her pain into an empire that now encompassed fashion, marketing, and public relations. The business world watched in awe as she systematically expanded her influence across Manhattan. Quotes from industry leaders filled the pages. Adrienne Delacroix isn't just selling clothes anymore, she's selling empowerment. The Phoenix collection speaks to every woman who's ever had to rebuild herself. She's redefined what it means to be a powerful woman in business. His eyes lingered on a photo spread featuring her in the Le Jardin corner booth, their old booth, now redecorated in the signature black and red of her new brand. She'd bought the restaurant too, transforming it into the hottest spot in Manhattan. The waiting list was months long, and every night, powerful women dined there wearing pieces from her Phoenix collection. A notification popped up on his screen. Breaking news about Sterling Delacroix's latest acquisition. Another company added to her growing empire. The stock price had tripled since she took over, making her board members rich, and him look like an incompetent fool in comparison. He scrolled through his social media feed, masochistically reading comments about the Forbes cover. From betrayed wife to business icon, now that's how you get revenge. Wearing her Phoenix suit to my divorce proceedings next week. This is what happens when you underestimate a strong woman. His new assistant knocked timidly on his door. "Mr. Delacroix, your 10 a.m. cancelled. They decided to go with, Sterling Delacroix instead." Of course they had. Everyone wanted to work with Adrienne now. She'd become more than a fashion designer or a CEO. She was a symbol of feminine power and resilience. Every betrayed woman in Manhattan wore her designs like armor, while their husbands squirmed uncomfortably in their seats. The magazine's final spread showed Adrienne in her office, the red dress from that fateful night framed on her wall like a battle flag. The interviewer had asked about it, and her response cut deep. "That dress reminds me of who I was and who I've become. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better." Dominic closed the magazine, but Adrienne's confident smile seemed burned into his retinas. He'd thought he was the successful one in their marriage, the power player, the strategic thinker. How wrong he'd been. While he was sneaking around with Sienna, Adrienne had been building an empire right under his nose. His phone buzzed again, this time with a meeting reminder. He had to pitch to a small local business, the kind of client he would have delegated to juniors in his Sterling Marketing days. The timing was ironic. At this very moment, Adrienne would be ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, celebrating Sterling Delacroix's latest successful quarter. He gathered his materials, straightened his off-the-rack suit, his designer wardrobe had been sacrificed to pay legal fees, and headed for the door. In the elevator mirror, he barely recognized himself. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a cautionary tale of hubris and infidelity. As he passed the newsstand in his building's lobby, he saw Adrienne's face on at least 3 other magazine covers. Each headline told the same story, not of a woman scorned, but of a phoenix rising from the ashes of betrayal to soar higher than ever before. Outside, A woman walked past wearing one of Adrian's designs, the distinctive red accent catching his eye. These days, it seemed like half of Manhattan wore her clothes, each piece a reminder of his monumental mistake. He'd thought he was trading up when he pursued Sienna. Instead, he'd lost the most valuable partner he'd ever had. The final quote from the Forbes article echoed in his mind. Success is the best revenge, but it's not about getting back at someone else. It's about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Sometimes it just takes a catastrophe to clear the path. Dominic stepped into the taxi, clutching his pitch materials like a lifeline. As they drove past the Sterling Delacroix building, his old building, he saw the new logo gleaming in the sunlight. Adrienne had kept the word Sterling in the company name, not out of respect, but as a trophy of conquest. He'd lost everything, his company, his reputation, his power. But worse than that, he'd lost the chance to be part of something extraordinary. Adrienne wasn't just successful now, she was legendary, and he was just another cautionary tale in her origin story, a stepping stone on her path to greatness. The taxi driver was reading page 6, and Dominic caught a glimpse of another headline about Adrienne's latest triumph. He looked away, but not before reading the tagline, "The best revenge isn't just living well, it's living extraordinarily." And that's exactly what Adrienne Delacroix was doing, while he sat in a cab, heading to pitch to a client who probably wouldn't even sign with him. The recognition was complete. He hadn't just betrayed his wife. He'd underestimated an empire in the making. And that mistake had cost him everything. Chapter 8. The Letter. In his modestly furnished apartment, a far cry from the luxury penthouse he once shared with Adrienne, Dominic sat at his small desk, a blank piece of Crane stationery before him. The morning light filtered through standard-issue blinds, a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. The Forbes magazine, with Adrienne's cover story, lay open beside him, her confident smile both inspiring and haunting. After months of sleepless nights and endless days watching his former empire thrive under Adrienne's leadership, he had finally gathered the courage to do what he should have done the moment she walked out of Le Jardin. He lifted his Mont Blanc pen, one of the few luxuries he'd managed to keep, and began to write. My dearest Adrienne, I've written this letter 1,000 times in my head, each version more inadequate than the last. How does one apologize for destroying something precious? How do I find words to express the depth of my regret for shattering not just our marriage, but your trust in love itself? The woman I see on magazine covers, the empire builder, the phoenix who rose from the ashes of my betrayal, she was always there, wasn't she? You were always this extraordinary, this powerful, this capable of greatness. I was just too blind, too consumed by my own ego to see it. Every day, I walk past buildings that now bear your name. I see women wearing your designs like armor, drawing strength from the story behind each piece. The Phoenix collection isn't just fashion, it's a testament to your resilience, your strength, and my monumental foolishness in taking that for granted. I destroyed something precious that night at Le Jardin. Not just our marriage, but your trust. I shattered the foundation of 10 years of partnership, of love, of shared dreams and quiet moments. The weight of that destruction haunts me with every breath. You must wonder why I did it. I've asked myself that question every sleepless night since you walked out. Was it ego? Insecurity? The thrill of forbidden attraction? None of these reasons matter because they're all just excuses for an inexcusable betrayal. I watch you now, transforming pain into power, betrayal into empire, and I realize what I truly lost. Not just a beautiful wife or a supportive partner, but a force of nature. You've become everything you were always meant to be, and the bitter truth is that my betrayal was the key that unlocked your true potential. The irony doesn't escape me that in trying to prove my own importance, I only proved how small I really was. While I was sneaking around with Sienna, you were building an empire beneath the surface. When I thought I was being clever with my deceptions, you were orchestrating a takeover that would show the world who you truly are. Remember that night when we first met at Le Jardin? You wore that white blouse I accidentally stained with wine. I offered you my jacket and you laughed, turning a moment of embarrassment into one of charm. You've always had that gift, the ability to transform difficulties into opportunities. I should have known you'd do the same with my betrayal. I see now what I couldn't see then. Every success I achieved was possible because of you. Every client I landed, every deal I closed, you were the foundation that made it all possible. And like a fool, I took that foundation for granted until it crumbled beneath me. The business world speaks of you with awe now. Adrienne Delacroix, they say, the woman who turned betrayal into billions. They call you an inspiration, a symbol of feminine power and resilience. But they don't know the half of it. They don't know about the quiet strength you showed in small moments, the brilliant mind that was always working behind those beautiful amber eyes. I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. This letter isn't an attempt to win you back. We both know that bridge is burned. This is simply the truth I should have acknowledged long ago. You were always the better part of me, the stronger one, the one destined for greatness. Sienna was a symptom of my own inadequacy, my need to feel powerful when, deep down, I knew I was standing in the shadow of someone truly extraordinary. She stroked my ego while you challenged me to be better. I chose flattery over growth, and I'll regret that choice for the rest of my life. You've built something remarkable from the ashes of our marriage. The Phoenix collection isn't just a fashion line, it's a declaration of war against every man who ever underestimated a woman. Every piece tells a story of transformation, of power reclaimed, of beauty forged in fire. It's magnificent, and it's absolutely terrifying. I see you now, truly see you, as you stand atop the empire you've built. The business world calls it revenge, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's liberation. You're not just successful, you're transcendent. You've become something beyond my comprehension, beyond my reach, beyond any small dreams I might have had for us. The woman in the red dress who walked into Le Jardin that night died because of my betrayal. But from those ashes rose someone extraordinary, someone I never deserved in the first place. You're no longer Adrienne Delacroix, my wife. You're Adrienne Delacroix, force of nature, empire builder, queen of Manhattan's business world. I won't ask for forgiveness. I won't beg for another chance. Those are privileges I forfeited the moment I betrayed everything we built together. Instead, I offer you this: complete honesty, perhaps for the first time in our relationship. You are extraordinary, Adrienne. You always were. It took losing you for me to truly understand that. Every success you achieve, every headline you generate, every empire you build, it's not revenge, it's destiny. You were always meant for this greatness. I was just an obstacle in your path. The red dress you framed in your office, I see it in every magazine spread, glowing like a battle flag behind your desk. Keep it there. Let it remind every person who enters that room of the price of underestimating Adrienne Delacroix. Let it be a warning to anyone who thinks they can dim your light. I'm staying in Manhattan, not to torture myself, though seeing your success everywhere does exactly that. I'm staying because I deserve to watch you soar, to be reminded every day of what I lost through my own foolishness. Consider it my penance to live in the shadow of the empire I could have been part of had I been wise enough to appreciate the extraordinary woman who stood beside me. The business world calls your story the ultimate revenge. They're wrong. This isn't revenge, it's resurrection. You've become who you were always meant to be, and all I can do now is watch from afar and know that I once held starlight in my hands, and like a fool, I let it slip away. With deepest regret and endless admiration, Dominic. He signed his name with a steady hand, though his vision blurred with unshed tears. The morning had turned to afternoon as he wrote, pouring months of regret and realization onto the expensive paper. Outside his window, another billboard for the Phoenix collection seemed to mock him, a woman in a red power suit, rising from flames, with the tagline, "From Ashes to Empire." Dominic carefully folded the letter, sliding it into an envelope made of the same heavy cream paper. He wrote Adrienne's name on the front, not her address, which he knew she'd changed, but simply Adrienne Delacroix. Her office would know where to find her. Everyone knew where to find her these days. He walked to the nearest post office himself, unwilling to trust this task to anyone else. As he handed the letter over, he caught his reflection in the glass, greyer, older, humbled. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a man who had finally learned the cost of his arrogance. The letter wouldn't change anything. He knew that. Adrienne's path was set, her transformation complete. But perhaps, in acknowledging the magnitude of what he'd lost, he could begin his own transformation. Not back to who he was. That man was gone, destroyed by his own hubris, but into someone who at least deserved to exist in the same city as Adrienne Delacroix. As he stepped back onto the Manhattan streets, he looked up at the towering buildings that now bore witness to Adrienne's triumph. The woman he'd betrayed had become a legend, and all he could do was watch from the shadows, knowing he'd had starlight in his grasp and let it slip through his fingers. The letter was sent, the truth was told, and somewhere in her tower of power, Adrienne would read his words and know that at least, finally, he understood the magnitude of what he'd lost. It wasn't just a wife or a marriage, it was the chance to be part of something extraordinary, something powerful, something that would be remembered long after both of them were gone. The phoenix had risen, and all he could do now was watch her soar. Chapter 9. The Conditions. The top floor of Delacroix Tower gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight, the Manhattan skyline creating a dramatic backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Adrienne sat at her desk, Dominic's letter open before her. She'd read it 7 times since it arrived that morning, each reading stirring a different emotion in her carefully controlled heart. Her office had changed since the takeover. The red dress still hung in its frame, but now it was surrounded by magazine covers, awards, and the mounting evidence of her success. The Wall Street Journal had dubbed her the Phoenix of Manhattan, and the name had stuck. Every business publication wanted her story. Every aspiring entrepreneur wanted her advice. Victoria Chen, her head of legal, sat across from her, reviewing the latest acquisition documents. "The letter changes nothing legally," she said, her tone professional but gentle. "However, it does provide an interesting opportunity." Adrienne rose, moving to stand before the window. Below, the city pulsed with life, and somewhere down there, Dominic was waiting for her response. The man who had shattered her world now sought redemption. His words were beautiful, carefully crafted, just like all his lies had been. "Draft the conditions," Adrienne commanded, her voice steady. 3 of them. Make them impossible, but not illegal. I want him to understand exactly what redemption costs. Victoria pulled out her tablet, fingers poised. "What did you have in mind?" Adrienne turned, the sunset casting her silhouette in flames. "First condition, a public admission of his betrayal, not just to the board, not just to the press. I want him to speak at the Women in Business conference next month. Full disclosure, no sugarcoating. Let him tell 500 of the most powerful women in Manhattan exactly how he betrayed not just his wife, but every woman who's ever trusted a man in power." Victoria nodded, typing quickly. "That will destroy any chance of him rebuilding his professional reputation." "Second condition," Adrienne continued, running her finger along the frame holding the red dress. He signs over all his remaining shares in Sterling Delacroix to my Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. Not for money, not for tax benefits, as a gift. Everything he still owns of the company he built, given to help women he would have once underestimated. That's his entire retirement fund, Victoria noted, a small smile playing at her lips. Nearly 50 million in stock. And the third condition. Adrienne paused, picking up Dominic's letter again. 6 months of proving his commitment through actions, not words. I want weekly progress reports on concrete steps he's taking to make amends, mentoring female executives, supporting women-owned businesses, putting his money and time where his pretty words are. No shortcuts, no delegating, no using his connections. Real work, real commitment, real change. Victoria finished typing and looked up. These conditions will strip him of everything. His pride, his financial security, his professional standing. Are you sure? He writes about seeing me now, truly seeing me, Adrienne quoted from the letter. Let's see if he's ready to truly see himself, to see exactly what his betrayal cost, not just in emotional terms, but in cold, hard reality. She moved to her desk, pressing the intercom. Send in the PR team. Within moments, her top communications strategist filed in, tablets ready. Ladies, Adrienne addressed them, we're about to launch a new campaign, not for fashion, not for marketing, for redemption. I want every step of Dominic's journey documented, every sacrifice publicized, every moment of humiliation captured for posterity. If he wants forgiveness, he'll earn it in the spotlight. The team began brainstorming immediately. Headlines, social media strategies, video content, all designed to turn Dominic's redemption into a public spectacle. It would be the ultimate reality show, played out in boardrooms and business publications. Make it clear, Adrienne instructed, that this isn't about revenge. This is about transformation. If he wants to be part of my world again, he needs to transform just as completely as I did, from entitled executive to humble servant of change. Victoria reviewed the final draft of the conditions. This is more than punishment, isn't it? This is reformation. Adrienne smiled, a sharp edge to her expression. He writes about watching me rise from the ashes. Now he gets to walk through fire himself. Let's see what kind of phoenix he becomes. Her assistant entered with the evening papers. More headlines about Delacroix Empire's latest triumphs. More stories about the woman who turned betrayal into billions. But soon, if Dominic accepted her conditions, there would be a new story. A story about a man willing to sacrifice everything for a chance at redemption. Send the conditions, Adrienne commanded, and make sure the final line reads, "The woman you betrayed died in that restaurant. If you want to know the woman I've become, these are my terms, non-negotiable." As her team filed out, Adrienne stood again at her window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, Dominic would soon receive her response to his letter. He would learn that pretty words weren't enough, that real redemption came at a price few men would be willing to pay. The red dress caught the last rays of sunlight, glowing like a burning banner behind her. The conditions were set. The choice was his. And Adrienne Delacroix, the phoenix of Manhattan, would watch and wait to see if the man who had broken her heart had enough courage to break himself down and rebuild from scratch, just as she had done in the ashes of their marriage. Chapter 10. The Redemption. The Women in Business Conference Hall was packed to capacity, 500 of Manhattan's most powerful female executives leaning forward in their seats. Dominic stood at the podium, his designer suit replaced by a modest, off-the-rack ensemble. He'd lost weight in the past month, his face leaner, humbled by the task before him. "My name is Dominic Delacroix," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "And I'm here to tell you about the night I lost everything by betraying an extraordinary woman. The crowd was silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on him. In the front row, Adrienne sat perfectly poised in a creation from her Phoenix collection, her face impassive. Behind him, a giant screen showed the infamous Le Jardin scene. His affair exposed, his life unraveled. "I was the executive partner of Sterling Marketing," he continued. "I had power, prestige, and a wife whose brilliance I took for granted. I thought success was about the deals I closed, the clients I won. I was wrong. True success was sitting across the breakfast table from me every morning, and I was too blind to see it." For the next hour, he laid bare every detail of his betrayal. The lies he'd told, the ways he'd manipulated both Adrienne and Sienna, the casual arrogance with which he'd risked everything they'd built together. No sugarcoating, no excuses, just raw, uncomfortable truth. "I didn't just betray my wife," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I betrayed every woman who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or taken for granted. I perpetuated a culture that values male ego over female brilliance." Camera flashes punctuated his speech. Every business publication was there, documenting his public confession. His professional reputation crumbled with each word, but that was part of the price. Later that week, he signed over his shares in Sterling Delacroix to Adrienne's foundation. $50 million in stock, his entire retirement fund, everything he had left of the company he'd built. The financial press had a field day. Disgraced executive surrenders fortune to female entrepreneurs fund. But the hardest part was just beginning. Every Monday morning found him mentoring female executives, teaching them how to recognize and counter the very tactics he'd once used to dismiss them. Every Wednesday, he reviewed business plans for women-owned startups, offering insights from his years of experience. The weekends were spent volunteering at women's shelters, helping survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their professional lives. He learned to listen, really listen, to stories of betrayal and resilience. Each one reminded him of what he'd done to Adrienne. His progress reports went viral each week. The business world watched as the former power player learned humility, learned to serve rather than dominate. Some called it a publicity stunt, others called it justice. Dominic just called it necessary. In his small apartment, he kept a copy of every magazine featuring Adrienne's success. Not to torture himself, but to remind himself of what real power looked like. Not the ability to dominate others, but the strength to rise above betrayal and create something magnificent. 3 months into his redemption journey, he received an envelope from Adrienne's office. Inside was a single ticket to the Phoenix Collection's anniversary show, with a note, "Halfway there, don't stop now." He attended the show, sitting in the back, watching as models strutted down the runway, in designs that told stories of transformation. Each piece spoke of strength, of resilience, of rising from ashes. He recognized himself in those ashes now. The final month of his journey brought the hardest task yet, speaking at universities, warning young businessmen about the cost of arrogance, the price of betrayal. He told his story again and again, each telling stripping away another layer of his old self. "Success isn't about power over others," he would tell them. "It's about empowering others. I learned that lesson too late, but you don't have to." When the 6 months were finally complete, his final progress report ran to hundreds of pages. Every mentoring session, every startup he'd advised, every shelter he'd visited, all documented in detail. The man who submitted that report bore little resemblance to the one who had sat in Le Jardin with Sienna that fateful night. The media dubbed his journey the most expensive apology in Manhattan history. They weren't wrong. It had cost him his fortune, his reputation, and his pride. But as he sealed the final report, Dominic realized he'd gained something more valuable: understanding. He understood now what Adrienne had always been capable of: what she had become in spite of his betrayal. He understood the true meaning of power, of success, of redemption. Most importantly, he understood that some things, once broken, can only be rebuilt into something entirely new. The lessons had been expensive, but they had transformed him as completely as betrayal had transformed Adrienne. They were both phoenixes now, risen from the same ashes, though their flights had taken very different paths. His redemption wasn't about winning her back. That was impossible. It was about becoming someone worthy of existing in the same city as Adrienne Delacroix, someone who could look at his reflection and see not just his failures, but his potential for change. The red dress still hung in her office, a reminder of endings and beginnings. But now, when he saw it in magazine photos, he didn't see just his betrayal. He saw the catalyst for two transformations. One that turned a betrayed wife into a business icon, and another that turned an arrogant executive into a humble agent of change. The price of redemption had been high, but as Dominic submitted his final report, he knew it had been worth every penny, every moment of humiliation, every hard lesson learned. He had lost an empire, but he had gained something more valuable: wisdom. And somewhere in her tower of power, Adrienne would read his final report and know that her conditions hadn't just punished him, they had transformed him, just as she had transformed herself. He had risen from the ashes of his own destruction to become something new. The game wasn't over, but the rules had changed forever, and both players were better for it. Chapter 11. The Reunion. Le Jardin looked different now, transformed under Adrienne's ownership into something sleeker, more powerful. The soft, romantic lighting had been replaced with crystal chandeliers that cast no shadows, leaving nowhere for secrets to hide. The infamous corner booth where everything had shattered was now the most sought-after seat in Manhattan. Adrienne chose that booth deliberately for their first meeting since his redemption journey began. She arrived early, wearing an emerald green suit from her latest collection, the color of new growth, of spring after a long winter. The red dress era was over. This meeting would set a different tone. Through the restaurant's windows, she watched Dominic approach. Gone was the arrogant stride, the entitled demeanor. 6 months of humble service had changed him physically. He was leaner, grayed at the temples, his expensive suits replaced with modest clothing that spoke of priorities shifted. "You look stunning," he said, but this time his eyes held respect instead of desire. This wasn't the practiced charm of a man used to getting his way. This was the simple acknowledgement of someone who had learned to see clearly. The waiter appeared with champagne, not Dom Perignon, but a vintage they'd never shared. Everything about this meeting would be new, unmarked by their history. 6 months, Adrienne began, dispensing with pleasantries. Every condition met, every task completed, every sacrifice made public. The media calls it the most expensive apology in Manhattan history. "It wasn't about the money," Dominic replied quietly, his hands folded on the table. "It was about understanding, about becoming someone different than the man who sat in this booth with Sienna." "Your final report was thorough," Adrienne noted, lifting her glass, "particularly the section about the women's shelter programs. That wasn't part of the original conditions." "No, it wasn't. But somewhere between the public confession and the mentoring sessions, I realized this wasn't just about meeting your conditions. It was about becoming someone I could respect when I looked in the mirror." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared history. The restaurant hummed around them, filled with the city's elite wearing pieces from Adrienne's latest collection. She was everywhere in this room, in the decor, in the fashion, in the very air of success that permeated the space. "I read every report," Adrian said finally. Every week I watched you strip away another layer of the man I used to know, the man who betrayed me in this very booth. That man died the night you walked out, Dominic replied softly. Just as the woman in the red dress died here too. We're both different people now. Adrienne studied him over the rim of her champagne glass. Are we? Or are we finally our true selves? You were right in your letter. I was always capable of this. It just took your betrayal to show me. And it took losing everything to show me who I really was, and who I could become. He gestured to the restaurant, to the empire she'd built. You've created something extraordinary, Adrian, not because of me, but in spite of me. No, she corrected, her voice firm but gentle, because of both. Every success story needs a catalyst. You were mine. Your betrayal burned everything to the ground, but from those ashes... She gestured to the world she'd built, the empire that now bore her name. They all wear your designs now. Dominic smiled, with respect rather than mockery. Every woman I mentored, every entrepreneur I advised, they wear your clothes like armor. Not armor. Adrienne shook her head. Wings. These designs helped them soar, just as creating them helped me soar. She paused, then met his eyes directly. Just as watching their impact helped you transform. The truth hung between them, undeniable and somehow healing. They had both been transformed by that night in Le Jardin, she into an empire builder, he into a humble servant of change, both phoenixes rising from the same ashes but flying different paths. I don't expect forgiveness, Dominic said quietly. That's not why I accepted your conditions. I know, Adrienne replied. That's why we're having this conversation. Because you finally understood that this wasn't about earning forgiveness. It was about earning respect. Not just mine, but your own. She stood then, smoothing her emerald suit. Our story will be told for years in business schools and women's seminars, the betrayed wife who built an empire, the unfaithful husband who sacrificed everything for redemption, but they'll miss the real story. Which is? Dominic asked, standing too. That sometimes it takes complete destruction to reveal who we truly are. That real power isn't about control or dominance, it's about transformation. She extended her hand, a professional gesture that somehow carried the weight of their entire history. Goodbye, Dominic. Be well. He took her hand, understanding the finality of the moment. This wasn't a reconciliation, it was a closing ceremony, a beautiful end to a story that had transformed them both. As Adrienne walked out of Le Jardin, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor, she felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. Behind her, the red dress era. Ahead, an empire built on transformation and strength. She had risen, she had soared, and now she was truly free. The Phoenix of Manhattan stepped into her waiting car, leaving the ashes of her past behind. Some love stories end in heartbreak, some in redemption. But the best ones end in transformation, with both parties becoming exactly who they were always meant to be, even if that means flying in different directions. Subscribe if you liked. Dear friends, let us take a moment to come together in prayer for the people of California and Los Angeles. May they find strength, hope, and resilience during these challenging times. We pray for comfort for those who are suffering, safety for those in danger, and guidance for those working to provide relief and support. Let our thoughts and prayers be a source of light and encouragement for all in need.